Hi Paul, lovely to meet up with you again and do some further work on your game. Just a quick recap regarding the key points that we've covered so far, as promised during the last session. Top left hand swing is one of your early swings where you were just freewheeling it and seeing what sort of progress we've made, and straight away we noticed that the right arm, while softening a little bit more than it used to, it wasn't softening quite as much as we would have liked it to, which is understandable. You're quite happy to accept that this is an ongoing process. It's not going to be changed overnight, but as long as we keep drip feeding that change in, it should start to really pay dividends. You can see on the bottom left, this was sort of 3/4 of the way through your session. The overall movement is looking a little bit more, again, towards where we want it, a little bit less of a straight right arm, more of a softening and a more gradual loading of the wrists and the right arm during the backswing. So first thing we identified was obviously that we've got to continue to do the reps on the first change that we made during your first session. When viewed from down the line, we started to notice that the right arm not being as straight is creating a little bit better takeaway, the hands not elevating quite as fast, and the club not rolling quite as far underplane as it was before. We still, however, have the hands creeping up and the club creeping behind the hands. Now, ideally what we would want is what we see here demonstrated by Charlie Wee on the bottom right hand side of your screen. From P1 setup to P2 waist level, we'd want to see the club and the hands tracing the arc of the swing. And the reference point we use for the takeaway is through the line of the hands. So we're on hand plane. And you can see when you do that, the look that you have is the hands have come in and the club has stayed out. Now both clubs have worked in at a steady rate, but the club is making a bigger circle than the hands, if you will. So the club at P2 should never really catch up with the hands unless there's been a little bit too much rolling of accumulator 3, the back of the left hand. So we want to see more of the look that we're seeing there with Charlie on the bottom right. Now, what we discussed was that it's not just the rolling of the hand that can cause this, it's the incorrect loading of the wrists. So the feeling that you're using here in the bottom centre footage is pushing down on the butt of the club with the pad on the left hand. And that in turn is introducing a little bit earlier cocking of the wrists, which prevents the club from drifting behind the hands and therefore underplaying. And also actually encourages a little bit earlier softening of the right forearm, as can be seen on the bottom left footage, and has the hands a little bit more in at P2 when the shaft's parallel with the ground. We then started to see some changes at P3, so when the left arm's parallel with the ground, on your original swing we can see that the shaft is sitting very flat and therefore requires steepening quite substantially in the downswing, whereas now we have the shaft setting in a much more appropriate manner. Almost sort of, we were talking about that feeling of sort of floating the club head rather than having it drop behind you, which can then allow you to arrive in a better position at the top, but also change direction in a much more appropriate manner. So we just run these two swings to the top. I'm going to stop you when the club hits the yellow line. Club now is a little bit less laid off and a little bit less shut. And again, that fits into softening up that shot pattern that you've been experiencing where we're getting a pull, potential pull hook, etc. So looking much better at that stage. Then if we run this on a little bit further, because of the takeaway, there tended to be a little bit of a lift to the top. Much more compact look at the top of the backswing. And then as we change direction, there we can see a marked steepening of the shaft. So the shaft is much steeper at P5 than it was at P3. was now we're starting to shallow out the club a little bit more. Shaft coming a little bit more down the right forearm and being presented in a little bit more of an appropriate manner at delivery. We then started to talk about the through swing. Once you made the change in the takeaway, you started to leak a few off to the right. And what we discussed was the action of the right knee. There's a little bit too much rotation going on. And the reason that's happening is because the right knee is over flexing through the hip. You can see there's some daylight between the knees. If we just run Charlie through here, post impact, you can see that there's no daylight between the legs. And the reason for that is the sequence of moves that the right knee makes from P4. From P4, the right knee should return to its address flex by P5 and then begin to extend. So it's actually the act of pushing up out of the ground through the hip, which allows the hips to come out of the forward tilt and continue to turn, creating less of a closure of the club face and a sort of a flipping action, if you will, through impact. So regulating the closure on the club face, but also allowing the hips to continue to move forward and allowing the player to continue to hit out. We talked in the session that there's a similarity between you and Jordan Spieth when he's playing badly, where that right knee can get a little bit too flexy, the hips open up and back up a little bit, and you're hitting a lot of pulls if you're not careful. Now, you used to have to do that because of how fat and underplaying the swing was from P1 to P3, so that right knee is flexing forward to accommodate that move. And as we discussed during your session, there's a lot of compensations go on, which is what good players do, and you work out as an athlete how to make the ball go straight. So we do need to control what that right knee is doing a little bit more. Here we can see the effects from down the line of all the changes that we've made during this session. We've got the cane to control what the right knee is doing during the downswing. The feeling here on the way back is that we're going to push down on the butt of the club from P1 to P2. Just run this through at a different speed. As you can see there, a much better setting of the club. Much better at P3. Really nice at P4. I'm just going to take this centre one up to the top of the backswing. This was you in the early part of your session. Get rid of the lines. Let's just have a little look at where we are at P4. Much more under control that golf club is at the top of the backswing. Much more compact. Much earlier loading of the wrists and the right forearm, allowing the shaft to sort of reach just short of parallel in a much more efficient manner. And then what we're trying to do here is feel that the right knee moves into and then slides along that cane. So we don't want to see any overflexing of the right knee. Now this is early in the piece when you were first working this in. But you can see as you come through now, you've got to learn to tuck the hips, push up out the ground with the right leg and the left leg. And much less daylight, actually no daylight, between the knees during your finish. Very nice demonstration there. And when we look at it from face on, and we run this through, setup, we just push the hips forward a little bit to create a little bit of axis tilt. You can see how the right knee now is flexing much less than what you're seeing here on the top left footage. There's also less flex being maintained in the left knee. Just going to take these down. And the hips are much further forward. The tailbone is much more tucked under in the through swing. So a little bit more of a pushing down on the butt of the golf club from setup to waist level, and then working on controlling what the right knee is doing throughout the downswing. Plenty of practice with the cane in place. Paul can't stress how important that is. And when you are videoing your own swing, a nice little checkpoint for you would be no daylight between the legs during the downswing. So once we get to P5, when the shaft's parallel with the ground, we shouldn't want to see any daylight between the knees from there on in. Good luck with it. If you have any questions, obviously I've sent you the email across with the images and the various sort of items to consider regarding these changes. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call and we can discuss anything you like. Good luck in the coming months. I look forward to looking for you much nearer the top of the leaderboards. And as discussed during your session, you really just need a win under your belt and you're absolutely flying. Good luck with it and look forward to watching your progress over the coming weeks. Well done.